It is Sox versus Cubs the next two nights. Let's discuss how much we love to hate on the Cubbies, or maybe just being jealous that they're not a total dumpster fire. Maybe we'll discuss how the Sox are either going to add to the Northsiders' pain this season or help them get right. Next, Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the fan-sided network. You can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Smash that like button. Also follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, leave a 5-star review. So every doctor in Illinois will tell anyone who just had a baby if it's a boy or a girl, but then they're going to ask, Sox or Cubs? That is how the story has always gone when it comes to the loyalty to Chicago's baseball teams. It is North Side or South Side. You either go to the world's biggest sports bar at Wrigley Field or the stadium that has the best food in town, but it also has a stereotype neighborhood and guaranteed rate field. Whenever the Sox and Cubs play each other, it is a city divided, only to be united again when the Chicago Bears play. Cubs fans have always stereotyped Sox fans as mullet-wearing, Marlboro Miles earning, don't show up to the stadium type of fans. Sox fans, on the other hand, classify Cubs fans as party-goers who wouldn't know good baseball even if it was in front of their eyes. And how else do you describe a loyal following that went 108 years without a World Series? Now, I could talk about the Cubs and Sox rivalry for days. I grew up with it. I lived it. But I wanted to get an additional White Sox fan perspective on this crosstown rivalry, and also just have someone else besides me on the show talk about the White Sox misery. And also, maybe where we might find some joy. But first, from brakes to motors to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Now, people have been asking me, how can I talk about White Sox baseball every day with this team being so bad? So I figured my first guess, I had to bring the man who did this before me. There's Nick Murawski, right? I got it right. I didn't butcher your last name.
You got it, Todd. Yeah.
Co-host of the Guys Talk Back podcast, also a contributor at Future Sox, and that is one of the best places to get some hope and news on the Sox prospects. And again, also the former host of the show. Nick, how are you doing?
Todd, I'm great. Hey, thank you so much for bringing me back home. This was home for a year and a half. Man, so many great Sox fans I interacted with on a daily basis. Loyal. And, we thought 2022 was bad, and we know 2023 is bad. I can't imagine what you're going through right now, but I'm still really active, as you mentioned. I'm following this team just as closely, as I ever was, doing the weekly podcast, Good Guys Talk Back with my buddy Pat Hester, and jumping on the Future Sox World, their MLB centric show, which is covering just big league stuff. However, we got to talk, minor league guys, because that is really the future, and that's on Tuesday night. So I'm very involved, and it's painful. I'm hurt, but I know nothing else. I don't have a secondary team. I'm a fifth generation Sox fan, so I am in it, and I really am. I'm just, I'm hoping it's not a long, painful rebuild here.
I can introduce you to a second team. It's called the Milwaukee Brewers.
No.
North. They just beat the Cubs, and then they just whipped the White Sox. And obviously, you answered my first question I was going to say is what you've been up to since Locked On White Sox. And you did not leave under protest over Chris Getz being the general manager, correct?
I did not, but I've shared this story with people through Good Guys Talk Back and on Twitter X, and I was a 7-year season ticket holder. Had him for 7 years, and I decided not to renew my season tickets when they retained Pedro Grifol without even doing a search, without even second guessing. I also felt like the disconnect between organization, management, team, and fans, especially season ticket holders, something was different over the last couple of years. I felt like there's a little lack of respect. It was almost just a give me your money. Come on, what else are you going to do with your time? There were a lot of different little perks that were starting to slip away. And I felt like, we were being taken advantage of. And I said, I'm going to still watch this team. I'm going to still invest in this team. I'll go to my handful of games throughout, the season. But in terms of just like giving money, without even thinking, just because, I want to be a season ticket holder without seeing any investment in the product by the organization, I just couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, I remember my old man had tickets. He was part of a season ticket package back in the 90s with a bunch of teachers. And he actually gave up his tickets right after the strike when the White
Okay.
Sox dare raise their tickets to, I think it was from $12 to $15 a seat.
Yeah.
Just to show you inflation. And that's Jerry's MO.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to bring you on to talk about the Cubs-Sox rivalry, especially from the Southsiders' perspective. And do you feel with the recent state of the White Sox that this is even a rivalry right now?
I don't think it's a rivalry in terms of the teams or even the players. I think there were many years ago, where you had managers that were the same managers for several years facing each other. You had the same faces you saw on the north side and the south side. It was just like you just hated them. And there's been so much turnover. And I think if I was a Northside fan, I'd say, who are these guys? Who are these White Sox players? I've never heard of half these guys. There's so many new faces. Obviously, Council's new to this rivalry. This is Pedro's second year in it. This is more fan, generated. I think this is more, you got a coworker, you got a buddy, you got a family member, a friend, a spouse, a partner, whatever it is. And with both teams scuffling, Cubs being in a surprising situation, I think Sox, we knew this was going to happen if you've been paying attention since, August or September. This is the time for a little bit of bragging rights. This is the time to kind of give it to your buddy, and look, the Sox aren't going anywhere, but I want these games. I want the Sox to beat the Cubs down these two games, especially in Wrigley.
That's what I was going to ask then. Do you feel that this is basically the World Series? Granted, I do think they have a return at guaranteed rate. I think it's games each. Yeah,
they do. Yeah. I don't really look at it as necessarily the World Series. I just look at it as, and we'll probably talk later in this episode, but you want to find some silver linings in a season like this. You want to try to pick out some positives, some of the good. There are good things happening. And this would just be one of those things of like, okay, but to believe in the rivalry, you kind of have to have players that really invest in it, that also hate, the team on the north side. And I just don't think you've got guys on the White Sox that are that invested, that have been around that long, in terms of tenureship, or, like this is our team. You're not going to mess with that. Maybe maybe Tommy Pham will bring some of that, on Tuesday and Wednesday. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it. I don't have high hopes, but I'm really hoping that the Sox give it to them.
Yeah, I think it's become more of a fan rivalry, especially since Ozzy's no longer the manager. I mean, he was talking about, remember how big the rats were at Wrigley Field?
Sure, yeah.
How much he hated taking, the train to get there and all that. Do you have any annoying Cubs fans, friends, just in general in your life?
I used to. I absolutely did. I had some neighbors years ago that were just really annoying, and they had nothing to, both teams were horrible, decades ago. I've had some annoying coworkers, especially when the Sox have had good years, which is few and far between. And they might slip a little bit, or there might be a mini losing streak. Those Cub fans love to get in your ear about it. I have some very close friends in my life, though, that I've known for 20 plus years that are Cubs fans. So, it's not necessarily that I dislike and disdain Cub fans. It's more of the Cubs. I I can't, I'm not somebody that roots for them or wishes them well because they're a Chicago team. Again, we had a choice. You brought it up in the opening. This is what my father said to my brothers and I, it was just, and my mom too, both of them diehard Sox fans. Like you're a Sox fan. You're not, wishing the Cubs fans well or anything like that. It's Sox all the way.
Yeah, that was the most annoying thing I remember in 2003 when they were in the playoffs. And I remember, I think my dad, it was his 50th or 60th birthday party. People were like, "Why aren't you rooting for the Cubs? It's Chicago." And I'm like, "I'm a White Sox fan."
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And the Sox beat the Cubs that year. That was kind of the time when I started to not really hate the Cubs, because I grew up with WGN. When you got home from school, Cubs games were going to be on from April and May, and then in September. And remember, the WGN had the good cartoons. They had DuckTales and all that. So you're like, well, might as well watch the Cubs. And remember, my grandpa, he became a Cub fan after the Sox went to cable. So I grew up with it. I don't necessarily hate the Cubs fans either. I think they've cooled off after 2016. It's amazing what happens when you win a World Series and you're no longer bitter and jealous about that of the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you talked about 2022, and I want to get this in before the break, but does this Cubs team remind you of the 2022 Sox? Because, you think about it, they only made one splash move, and that was at manager. They, the thought was all along with the Reds, they have the best talent in the division, and yet the Cubs are 2 games under 500 and underachieving, and really didn't do a ton of moves besides add a manager.
Yeah, they really didn't. I don't follow it too close, but it's tough not to, observe and get hit with it during the off season. It's obviously, aside from Bears and whatever's happening with Bulls and Blackhawks, it's always, what big things are the Cubs doing? What could they do? And then it's like, we'll get to the Sox whenever we have time, if we have time. So I was impressed by the Craig Counsell move. I thought, wow, here you go. Here's a team that probably could have kept David Ross. I don't know. I've gotten mixed opinions from different Cubs fans in my life, in terms of their perspective on that. But they said, you know what? We think that this could be a missing piece for us to really push us. It shows you what, a manager's worth is, I guess. There's no managerial war, but in a way, the Cubs kind of showed it to us by the amount of money that they gave. They knew Counsell, obviously, with, playing Milwaukee for so many years, and they thought this was the guy. And you got to do more than that, though. You've got to, as we're finding, you got to have good players. You got to not just hustle guys and TWTW and gamers. You got to have good players, really good players. And I was a little surprised that, besides Bellinger coming back, which was kind of a foregone conclusion, that they didn't go out and grab anybody else to make it more of a, I guess, statement, heading into the season, that they were really going for something. So, yeah, I guess it kind of feels like that. If I was a Cub fan, I'd be ripping my hair out. Their bullpen is problematic. They're having issues, and I'm sure that they're saying this was not supposed to be like we were saying that in 2022.
Yeah. They did get Imanaga, who's been outstanding so far, except for he got jumped on by the Brewers, but that's because a lot of people think you give a guy 10 days off, it's probably going to be rusty. But Nick has agreed to hang out for the full show, so I appreciate that. So got to pay a few bills here. So let's discuss the play of the Sox more next on Locked On White Sox. And it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And right now, the over/under on the White Sox final win total is 51.5, and it's plus 104 on the over, minus 138 on the under. I think a historical bad season has no value, but if you put some money on a 50-win season, then you got some personal value to gain. Like, say, if you want to put $50 for 50 wins or less, you could possibly win $36.23. Hey, you want to put $500? You're going to get a lot more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox start a 2-game set against the crosstown rival Chicago Cubs. First pitch is at 7:05 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter, and thank you for making the show your first listen. Lots of great White Sox podcasts out there, like Good Guys Talk Back. I just hope I'm the first one you take in. Then you listen to Good Guys Talk Back with Nick Murawski. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Smash the like button. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star review. And leave a 5-star review for Nick's weekly show. He's still around. We're still glad to have him. That is the best mustache ever. And people, I grew a beard. I grow facial hair during the winter, and then I go clean shaven because of I don't want to have all the grime.
Yep.
I said, maybe I'll do a goatee. And somebody literally said when I first took over was, you got to grow the Nick stash. And I was like,
yeah.
I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can do that justice.
It's definitely a labor of love. Now I had a very full beard, and this was kind of like a COVID project. I was working on this mustache behind the mask, and nobody kind of knew what was going on, as I found the beard really itchy with the straps of the mask and everything. So I feel like I'm doing it justice, and so it's kind of taken over, and it's here to stay, I think, for a while.
Yeah, I mean, once you get over the initial growth phase, that's the part that bothers me, because you feel like you're scratching and it's just itchy. Yeah. Once you get over it, then yeah, you get used to it.
Smooth sailing.
Yes. So I got to ask you,
how
surprised are you Pedro Grifol has lasted this long?
I'm sorry to say I'm not terribly surprised, because of how much investment I've put in this organization and this team over the years, and I know how they operate, and I've stopped almost thinking they're going to do something different. The old Who song, "Won't Get Fooled Again." It's like I've been burned too many times. So they are going to stick with him for reasons that are beyond me. I'm infuriated, though. I'm extremely aggravated. I'm mad about it. It makes no sense to me at all. He's not the future in my mind at all. And I get it. Switching gears right now isn't going to automatically get you wins. They're not going to go on a winning streak, most likely. You never know. There could be a change in environment, and the Sox get a little bit of energy for a little bit that. But at the end of the day, they are what they are. But if you don't think Pedro Grifol is the future, which I don't, you got to get rid of him immediately, okay? Because he's not doing you any favors at all with his roster construction, with his in-game management, just his comments, just the way he goes about his business. I'm sorry. It's really embarrassing. You almost want to save him. Like, if you want to work in baseball again, like, let's get you out of here so you can save face. So I'm not surprised, because, like, look at what happened. They pushed Chris Getz up to general manager. He had no real business being general manager. They didn't even do a search. And Chris Getz, advocated for Pedro Grifol. It was Hans' hire, but I think Chris Getz played a real role in that. Chris Getz, a guy we now know Jerry thinks the world of. So, this is how these workings go in King Jerry's kingdom behind the scenes.
So, though, again, the Sox have lost 11 in a row, 15 of their past 16. Is this Pedro's last stand if they lose the next 2 games, in your opinion?
I don't think these 2 games would break it. I'm looking more at like a clean, like maybe all-star break type of thing. Because then you've got, that would be what, mid-July, the trade deadline's in a couple weeks. You'd get maybe Montoya, most likely. You shuffle him in right now, in season. And you've got a couple weeks to then deal whatever you're going to deal at the deadline. and you're going to see, more guys coming up from the pipeline. And I just don't want Pedro to be involved in any of that. I don't want him to be getting involved in these young guys coming up the future. I just don't want that stink on them, I guess.
Well, it's not even the stink. I'm just terrified. I know that there's still time. It's a long season. But what I don't like is and it's the front office too, they keep playing these veterans over young players.
Yeah.
And do you feel, because you're part of the Future Sox, content and all that, do you feel that that's hurting the development of the next good team? Or is it just like, hey, Todd, you're just using this to fill time when you talk about White Sox baseball every day?
No, you're onto something there. And again, guys that I have been fortunate enough to work with at Future Sox, like James Fox and Ian Eskridge and Danny Miller, who are really invested in the youngsters and in the farm system, and they've been doing it for years. And I've kind of been able to catch up a little bit and get their thoughts and bounce things off of them. I mean, the way they've handled, just Dom Fletcher and even letting Mania go way back towards the beginning of the season, and how they've, just their handlings of Colas, the organization, and the whole, Nastrini and Cannon, you're going to see them back and forth. But the Ramos thing, you can make arguments over that. Pedro's explanation of Ramos being sent down and how he tried to justify it was absolutely insane. But that bothers me. I want to see the young guys getting time. I want to see what we think will be 2025 and beyond. Pitching is a different beast because you got to be careful. Hopefully you're not rushing a guy with their arm and everything like that, and workload management. But, it's really, I guess, confusing, and it's been this way for a while, and how they go about their business and this whole, Corey Lee, Martin Maldonado thing with Pedro and the alternation, it's garbage. I want to see Corey Lee absolutely a majority of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a prime example. Corey Lee, we need to make sure that this isn't just a good start. This isn't just, he's caught, he's on a heater. It's just the same thing with Corey Julks. Is he on a heater, or is he going to be a viable, if anything, your fourth outfielder, say, in 2025? You need to find that out, and that's what infuriates me. And also, it's valuing guys that have no value. Mike Clevenger, for example, great example. Twice he's been passed on the open market. He was available last year. Yes, there was money, but still, somebody could have made a waiver claim on a guy that had a solid numbers and what was a 2F WAR. Nobody wanted him, and then he was on the free agent market again. Nobody wanted him, and you're bringing him out, and then you're leaking it to Bob Nightingale that, hey, we want to trade this guy, just like Chris Flexen. Hey, we want to trade this guy. These are guys that have no value, and that's the thing that frustrates me.
Yeah, Brad Keller. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And if that's the plan, that's really what the plan was by the front office, is to gobble up guys in the off season and at the beginnings of the regular season, with the intention that, well, we don't care what we do or minimize our future stars. We just want to see if we can get maybe some prospects at the deadline. Wow, that's not a sustainable plan.
Yeah, and not that the chances of getting your Jake Arrieta are very slim. That's catching lightning in the bottle. And, especially, and I know this is going to be a long introduction, but I do want to go over this before I hit the next break. But James Fegan was on the score today. He was with Bernstein and Holmes. He said the front office is trying to acquire talent closer to the AA or ready to get to the majors. And that is how you get a premium player that close as Fegan said. No team is going to part with, say, Gunnar Henderson, for example. What that means is the prospects they may get back might come with some risk, but like lower ceiling type risks, like Drew Thorpe, his lack of velocity, or, Jairo Iriarte. At least he'll be a reliever, but he's maybe not going to be that dominant starter. So how concerning should we be that Chris gets, and by proxy, owner Jerry Reinsdorf is loath to maybe go with some higher ceiling guys at rookie or A-ball that contenders are probably not going to have a problem giving up?
It's all very, problematic, I think, and we are living in deja vu. I mean, this happened if you were following and you were, really invested in the White Sox, listeners and I know the Locked On listeners are, diehards. In 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, we did this. We played this game of watching, assets that we had get flipped during the season, in the off season, at the trade deadline, for just to hype up this farm system. I don't know if it was just the ego of like, look at like our ranking, like we won the off season again. Look at where we're ranked in terms of farm systems, and everybody's slapping Han on the back and like oohing and on about what we had to work with and what could be. It's all could be, and so like we're in it again. It's like, honestly, I want to have hope, but I've seen it before. So until they get into a White Sox uniform and produce, and the organization, actually goes out and spends real money at the top of the free agency to answer a lot of the other, growing edges and problems that have been going on, right field, second base. It takes more than just accruing a farm system. We tried that, and it didn't work. So if that's the plan, it's going to be really upsetting. I mean, I know the Sox are going to have money this offseason, but you've heard that before as a White Sox fan. So, again, it's like, watch, see what they do, and then you got to hold them accountable. You've got to hold the organization, the general manager, everybody accountable for your actions. You said one thing about thinking you could be competitive in 2024 and, the Central's winnable. We heard that. But look at what it has done in this season. Look at the actions. Look at the what you've produced. So it's the same thing with going after prospects and how you're going to flip things and what your intentions are. Like I'll believe it when I see it, Todd.
Yeah. Well, you said you're able to stick around for one more segment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I'm breaking like every single policy here of Locked On, but Nick's back for a little bit. I figured I would pick his brain and none of that.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to not be the only one that's talking about this god-awful team. So
I know the feeling. I know
yes.
the feelings.
But let's finish up the show with talking about the chances of better days ahead. Next, Locked On White Sox. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. And the White Sox start a two-game set against the crosstown rival Chicago Cubs. First pitch is at 7:05 Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your current host, Todd Welter, with my predecessor, Nick Murawski. He's making a return to talk about the Cubs and Sox rivalry and just talk about the doom and gloom that has been this season. But I listened to Good Guys Talk Back this morning. I like how it is the Sunday night therapy for everybody.
It is.
If you watch it live, or if not, if you listen to it the next morning. And then you had a great point. Where is the joy? So where do you sometimes find any joy this season? Have you found any joy this season?
I found joy in personal, moments. Like I've told a story over the last couple of weeks. I've got a 2-year-old son, and he obviously is indoctrinated and is a White Sox fan. He had no choice, like I didn't have a choice in generations before. And he's been to a handful of games in his 2 years. He went to his first game though a couple weeks ago, and I was able to get a couple tickets. I took my parents and my wife, and he just was caught up in just being at a baseball game. we were lucky to have some nice seats, and we got him the campfire milkshake. We split it amongst each other, and he just was in heaven with that. He got to meet Southpaw out in the fan deck and take pictures. I mean, just his face lit up, and then Andrew Vaughn hit a home run, believe it or not, on that game, on that night. And the fireworks, and my son just putting his arms up, watching the fireworks, like, again, in awe. And it kind of took me by, it almost like humbled me a bit of, I got to forget about all the stuff as an angry adult Sox fan that I get roped into, all the management stuff and the money and what are they doing. And I just got to watch the game and his experience, through his eyes of, he just, it's a beautiful night, and he just is at a baseball game, and the Sox ended up winning, and he doesn't know how bad they are. He just had a fun night, with his parents and his grandparents. And I think that's where you kind of have to find the joy is connect with those like-minded people in your life. If you can get out to a game with some family, with some friends, and share those moments, tailgate, and have that living memory, because again, I don't think you're going to find a lot of it from the team. You might from individual performances by players, but I think it's more of like how you personally, what your journey is and how you find it with your connections and what the team means to you, through other people in your life.
Yeah, that I can totally relate to that. We actually went on Sunday when they were up here at American Family Field, and I took my daughter, and she was just loving it. We got her Dippin' Dots. She really wasn't knowing totally what was going on, but all she wanted to do was like go play in the playground and get hot dogs. And yeah, she cheered, and we cheered for both teams because the Brewers are kind of my NL team. I worked for them for 11 years. You get a paycheck, they grow on you.
Yeah,
trust me, that's the other. When people ask me how can I do this, my intern year at Miller Park was 2003 when they won 67 games, and that was the year before they only won like 55. So I have watched terrible baseball before. I can deal with it. And I remember too being a kid. I think my dad started taking me when I was 6, and that was, I think, the 88 or 89 season when they finished dead last. It was the year before they went to second place, and I never really cared how terrible they were. I was watching professional baseball players, and I was getting to hang out with my dad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're collecting. I mean, I was, collecting baseball cards with my brothers, and, you get these guys, Robin Venturas and Frank Thomas, Jack McDowell, and you go to the game and you get to see them play. Carlton Fisk. It just blew your mind.
Yeah. So where do you look at in the organization though for hope? Is it AA? Is it top 5 pick this year? Is it going to be the new sports network the Sox and Bulls and Hawks are start rolling out in October?
Jerry loves trying to, develop all these new things, whether it's a TV station or a stadium, anything but build a real team, anything but build a real team. I'll do all these other things. It's not the pick. It's not all that. I think there's some young guys that, I am excited to see, Noah Schultz develop, and I'm excited to see, what Thorpe maybe, can do, with some time. Colson Montgomery, of course, that's the big ticket item. I think we're all waiting to see, how that translates eventually to the big leagues. I've liked Ramos. I hope he continues. Like, I hope he gets back up soon. I do think he's going to be your third baseman next year. I don't believe Moncada is going to be wearing a White Sox uniform much longer whenever he comes back from his injury. So what you're seeing right now, though, with Crochet, to me, is must watch. I mean, it's what Sale used to be. It was what Rodon was in the beginnings of 2021. And of course, Dylan Cease in that magical 2022 season where he was runner up for the Cy Young and other, starts throughout his career in a White Sox uniform. He had some filthy stuff. Crochet is fun to watch. He had a couple speed bumps, but for what he said he wanted to do at the beginning of the season in spring training, and everyone looked at him like he was crazy. Like, you've got what, 70 something innings over the last 3 years on your arm. You've never started before, and this is what you want to do. And, I went down to spring training and I saw him in person, and I followed spring training pretty closely, and he did not look out of sorts. It didn't look like the stage was too big for him. And there's going to be some, continued bumps. And I think we're going to start running into some, innings limits here, and how they manage Crochet is going to be interesting. But I really hope they invest in pitching, the Chicago White Sox, for the future. Be purposeful, invest in pitching for the future. And I do hope Crochet is somebody that they seriously try to invest in moving forward.
Yeah, 3 things I want to get to before we end. But first, the pitching, I totally agree. I would like to see them be a blend of the Cleveland Guardians when it comes to the pitching, and then mix in the Baltimore Orioles, the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Tampa Bay Rays of a philosophy. At least draft up the middle, 1 through 3, maybe fix on your position players, and then like 4 through 10, you just really hammer home on pitchers. And not saying like if you got a stud pitcher in the first round, like you just ignore it. No, you take a look at that too. I fully agree. But I'd like to see them become this melting pot of 4 organizations that have done things very well to maybe get some sustained success, and also convince an owner who doesn't like to spend money, a lot of money, that there's a return on that investment.
Yeah, that unfortunately is the big issue. I was talking to a friend of mine during the Baltimore Orioles serial, diehard Orioles fan, and he told me what the difference maker was. And, the Baltimore Orioles went out and they got a Houston GM. No one in the fandom, Orioles fandom, thought they were going to land that guy and the assistant GM. And they started doing things very differently. And the owner was kind of like hands off, like, go ahead, do what you want to do. I would love if Jerry did that and actually brought in people that were different thinking and forced him to spend money. And you went to different organizations that are doing it right and, cutting edge and really progressive. Boy, that would make a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see him. Okay, he's not going to spend money to get Juan Soto, even though I think he should. It's a hope, but he should. If you want a $1.9 billion stadium, get a superstar.
Yes.
It might be a draw,
sure.
But on the flip side, then if you're not going to, if you're loath to spend that $100 million or whatever, fine. Then invest it on like the Rays. The Rays can compete in the scouting and the analytics and the prospects. And now that it doesn't cost as much as say Juan Soto will. So spend on there, take them through the 6.5 years, and then flip them. And hopefully you get some competitiveness. And then that again, do it what the Guardians do and the Brewers. Get a pitching lab. And then do the draft strategy that the Rays, the Orioles, and the Brewers execute. And I think you might have something. And I would just wish somebody in that organization would say, Jerry, what is it? In his end of year or when he was talking about Getz, I was like, man, we should hire some of these scouts that these guys got fired. I would say, fine, I'll take more eyeballs, but I need more analysts too. I need more of everything. And these won't cost as nearly as much as that $200 million second baseman who hits 200 that he's loath to pay.
Yeah, it's being run like a mom and pop organization. It has been for many, many, many years. Jerry surrounds himself with people that, like what Pedro just did recently with his comments, that will suck up to him, will hype him up as somebody that wants to win, more than anything. And that's, you got to have a team of rivals. You've got to have people that push you to be a little uncomfortable, to experience the growth, the upward trajectory. And that he hasn't done that. He hasn't put people around him. And when there are people that kind of buck back, I mean, he just lets them go. He's just like, what, you're done. That's not what I want,
Unless they drive ratings, then they get to be put on the poster.
Sure.
Right, 2 things that I wanted to get to, and then we're going to call it a show here. I brought it up you brought up Noah Schultz, and that's why I wanted to actually quickly talk about this. I talked about it on yesterday's show. Noah Schultz, they've got him on a 4-inning limit. Would it maybe make more sense to make him more of a high leverage reliever at the pros with his stuff, or do you still try to continue to develop him to be a starter? And I will preface this: I hate when people are like, "Well, Kerry Crochet should still go back to the bullpen. He throws 100 miles an hour," but how they're developing Schultz, I get they're being conservative, but to me, it's like, well, then why don't we just use him as kind of how Michael Kopech was used in 2021?
I would like to see Noah Schultz as a starter. I think I think he wants to be a starter. I think he would like to be groomed as a starter. And I think that would be something that would be very beneficial for the White Sox organization. Lefties they don't come around too often. We've had them here and there, and then they're gone. Like, we've had moments in our rotation where there are no lefties, we've got one now in Crochet, and hopefully he sticks around. But what they did with Kopech, that one really confused me. I'm sorry to say that I'm not surprised at Kopech struggling out of the bullpen. You were going to turn him into a sprinter and not a marathon runner. He's got the triple digits he could pull out every now and then. That's dangerous. But when you have zero control and you're being brought in situations that are a little sticky and you don't have that control, there's a lot of pressure there. And the way they've kind of played this game with him, and he made a comment at the beginning of the season when they told him that he's going to be now in the bullpen. He's like, well, I prepared all offseason pretty much to be a starter. And that's a different preparation than preparing to be a reliever, a bullpen arm. So now he's got to have a complete switch of focus. And he was the company guy and saying, hey, anything for the team. But I think that does something with your psyche, especially a guy like Kopech, and your body and how you prepare. So whatever they decide, let's put it this way with Schultz, I hope they stick with it. And this is the plan. And I hope it's as a starter.
All right. 2 more questions. Should the Sox trade Crochet? I've seen that. You've probably seen that going around in White Sox X Twitter world. I think it's a bad idea. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I would, obviously, if you're trading for Crochet, you realize you're not going to get much out of him towards the end of the season. He's going to be on an innings limit. So this is a future thing. And this is an organization that, is looking at themselves moving forward and saying, well, we could be really something in 2025. And if we add Crochet, wow, we've already got a jump start on things. I would like the Sox to hold on to Crochet. I'm sure there's going to be questions. I'm sure there's going to be, unless some organization gets absolutely crazy and they are going to really empty the farm, which I don't see it, then I think you got to listen. The Sox are in that position, right? They've got to be listening to just about everything in their world here. But I would like them to hold on to Crochet.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only way I would even entertain is if it's a crazy offer, and he's also said, I've just hired Scott Boras as my agent. Then you have no chance of extending him. Final question. Would you do a Malort shot with a cicada in it?
I would say 15 years ago, and if I was in Milwaukee, I would probably do several of them. I had a pretty wild, late 20s, 30s lifestyle. I was a little too reckless. So if I had the right amount of kind of combinations in my system already and somebody offered me that, I wouldn't think twice about it. I've been to several Milwaukee Sox games, and I have eaten well and I drank well. And yeah, if it was like nowadays, no, but years ago, absolutely.
Yeah, me too. I would not do it nowadays. I was maybe more the preface of, in my partying days, would I have entertained it? And the other reason I brought up is from the 108 guys and the Shy Sports Bums guys. They had that tailgate, and that has gone viral. So
yeah, well, they're all over my neighborhood. That's for sure. The cicadas, that is.
Yeah. Well, Nick, I appreciate your time, and this wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Before I go, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts. Locked On Plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And I'll be back tomorrow to talk about the Sox taking on the Cubs. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page at Locked On White Sox. Also, make sure to subscribe to, what is the YouTube page for you, Nick?
Good Guys Talk Back.
Yep. Make sure you subscribe to that, smash the like button, and give a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcast. And also feel free to leave comments about today's topics. And Nick, coming back for one show. Hey, thanks, Nick. And you can leave them at Twitter at ToddJDub or email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.